At its core, Dungeons & Dragons, or D&D, is a collaborative storytelling game where there isn't winning or losing, just creating a cool story which anyone can get into, and I believe everyone should try. This video is going to run you through the basics of what you need to know, how to play, and some of the main rules you're going to need to know in order to be able to run your first game. There's a lot of information, and it's going to be cut up into 2 videos because there is just so much information. So take it in chunks if you need, but it will be worth it, I guarantee. And once you understand how the system works, you can make a story for any genre of storytelling. Fantasy is the main genre of D&D with wizards, dragons, and knights, but that doesn't mean you couldn't use the wizard as a hacker in a cyberpunk setting, or the Eldritch Knight as a Jedi in a Star Wars setting. The TLDR for this video is, the Dungeon Master narrates the scenario. The players interact with the scenario by saying, I want to do this thing. They roll the dice and then use the result of the dice to determine how well you succeed at doing the thing that you wanted to do. The Dungeon Master continues narrating the scene with your actions now affecting it. But in order to get to that point, what do you need? Well, the most important thing is to have someone who is guiding the story, informing everyone else at the table what's going on as the story progresses, and is the one who is describing people, places, and actions. This person is usually either called the Dungeon Master or the Game Master, the GM or the DM. This is the person who, in shows such as SpongeBob or more recently Stranger Things, is behind the cardboard sheet folded in 3 or 4 different places. Now, if this role falls to you, don't panic. It's okay not to know all the rules and to not be able to do crazy character voices for everyone your players will meet. The most important thing is that above absolutely everyone else, everyone is having fun. It's a game, and you should be having fun with it. But what are these players? Generally, there will be 4 other people who take on the role of heroes, champions, or mercenaries, and this band of intrepid adventurers will be the focus for the story being told. I will be doing another video in the future on making your adventurers in a bit more detail, but to go over it in broad strokes, you first need a character sheet, a pencil, and some dice. As a player, you make your character by choosing a race, such as a human, an elf, or a dwarf, then choosing a class, or choosing how they fight and interact with the world, such as a wizard, who will usually be focused around the use of spells and understanding what magic really is through the study and dedication of the arcane. Or a druid, who is someone in touch with nature and able to transform themselves into various animals. Each of these classes have things that only they can do, which changes how you interact with the world around you. The next thing for you to do in making your character is to decide where they came from before they started adventuring. Were they a simple town guard or a sailor? Each of these backgrounds comes with a few little bonuses for your character, making them better at dealing with certain things than other backgrounds. For instance, if in your past life, before your character was an adventurer, you were a criminal, you would be better at deceiving people and hiding than someone who spent their days as a sailor. But congratulations, you now have your dwarf druid who used to be a town guard, and you're looking at this character sheet in front of you thinking, what's all this other stuff? Well, that is what makes your character truly unique. You have your main stats. These determine how strong your character is, how hardy or nimble or smart they are. Each of these boxes needs a number. Now, where does one get these numbers from? Well, there are a few ways you can get them. You can use the standard numbers, otherwise known as the standard array. That's 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. Or you can roll 4 normal dice, or d6. Get rid of the lowest number of the 4, and then add up the remaining 3. Do this 6 times and voila, your very own set of numbers for your very own character. But once you have your numbers, you're going to want to put them onto your character sheet. But before you go whacking them into wherever looks nice, you should know that certain classes will do better with their numbers or stats in certain places when compared to others, as each of these numbers will affect your dice rolling later. The higher the number that you have in your stats, the higher the number that you can add to your dice later on. If you have a 14 in your character's strength stat, you'll get to add 2 to your dice roll when your dungeon master calls for a check using strength. That 2 that you get to add is called your modifier, in this case your strength modifier. You can see the modifier and how they compare to your numbers on this chart. So once your character sheet is filled out, like I said before, I will go over it in more detail in another video, but you, the player, are in a pretty good situation to get started. The Dungeon Master has a few things that they still need to figure out first. If this is your first time DMing, then there is one thing that you will absolutely need to know. And that's how to call for checks or for rolls, so that you can adjust the story that you're creating for the players. Let me set up a scenario to make it easier for you to understand what I mean. In the story that you and your group of adventurers are creating, the party is travelling down a rather unused, dusty road, and have come across a fallen tree on the path. One of the players wants to try to roll it out of the way. At this point, you need to decide as a dungeon master a few things. How big is this tree? And based on that, how difficult would it be for a person to roll this tree out of the way? Once you've decided that, you can compare it against this chart, whether it's easy, medium, hard, and so on. If it's a light tree and easy to move, the player needs to roll their d20, add their strength modifier to the roll, and get higher than a 5. If it's a larger tree and would be harder to move out of the way, they need to roll higher than a 20. You decide that the tree isn't huge, but it could be rolled out of the way with a roll of 15 or higher. You decide to ask the player for a strength check. They roll, and after adding their strength modifier, they get 12. Not quite high enough to move the tree out of the way. So you now describe how they squat down and try to get a firm grasp of the tree, but as they try to move it, they just cannot seem to summon the force needed to shove this tree out of the way. I should add another important rule for the DM at this point. Failing forward, or the yes and rule. It's not really a rule, it's more of a guideline, but it's that no matter what happens, you should try to keep the story moving forwards. So, for instance, the player that tried to move the tree but couldn't. Don't stop describing the scenario when you stop saying how he can't manage to move it. Mention the fact that while his head is down on the tree while trying to get the solid grasp, he notices that the tree looks like it's been cut down and there doesn't seem to be any tools nearby. That extra little bit of information gives your players something to bounce off of. It keeps the momentum of the game moving forwards, because if you just say, no, you can't lift it, what do? Then you're going to end up in a point where they have tried some things, none of it has worked, and now they have no idea what to do. They're going to feel stuck in a way that's unfun. And in a game all about fun, this is the last thing that you want to happen. Now, back to the scenario. After you mention to your players that they notice that the tree looks like it's been cut, one of your players decides they want to go check it out to inspect it. This is where you'd call for another type of dice roll, an investigation check. This is a skill check. It's not found with strength and dexterity. This is just off to the side, and depending how your players built their characters, again, I will go over character creation in detail in another video. They might have modifiers in these skills that are really high. That's fine. Don't adjust your difficulty of the dice because your players have high modifiers. They're choosing those things to be good at because they want to feel heroic and great in those specific areas. As a bonus tip, it might be helpful for you as a DM to have a character sheet nearby so that you can check against it for the type of checks that you can ask for. Back to the scenario. For checks like this, where players are looking to gain some information as you're asking your party for the investigation check, have a base amount of information ready to go that simply asking about will lead them further into the story, but treat that difficulty check chart as tiers of information that they could get if they manage to reach it. If they roll low and don't even manage to get a 5, just give them that base information, such as the tree was cut down in such a way that it would directly land on the road, and in that there is enough information for them to investigate further, which is what you want. But if they manage to roll higher, they manage to find tracks leading away from the tree, deeper into the forest. The important thing to remember for skill checks is to be open for anything. If a player wants to try something crazy, remember that yes and rule. A player wants to try moving a log out of the way by getting on top of it and roll it that way. Sure, it's going to be harder to do, but why not? It's fun. And if they want to try something that really just wouldn't work, like trying to blow it out of the way like the big bad wolf, let them try. But don't ask them to roll for it. Just describe how their character walks up to the tree that blocks their path. They plant the feet into the ground, inhaling deeply, and blow at the tree with as much force as their lungs will allow. And maybe they manage to blow a leaf off the tree. Keep the players engaged and just have fun. There are 3 main pillars of activity when it comes down to Dungeons and Dragons, and what we have just discussed covers 2 of those, being exploration and social interaction. Social interaction? We didn't talk about that. No, but the rules that you need to understand in order to roll for moving a tree out of the way would be the same as those to get cheaper prices on your night's stay at an inn, but instead of rolling for a strength check, you would instead roll for a persuasion check. Though there is one thing to mention in the social interaction space: you don't have to act any of these characters out if you don't want to. You do what you're comfortable with. You can easily just say, my character walks up to the tavern bar and asks for a room for the night. That's perfectly fine, and the same goes for the DM. If you're not comfortable pretending to be a town guard, you can just say that this guard that you're asking for directions from points you to the far side of town and gives you the directions in a gruff Scottish accent. You just do what you are comfortable with. And this is the part where this video comes to an end, I'm afraid. In the next video, we will go over the 3rd pillar of this game, that being combat, fighting, how to run it, the base rules that you're going to need to know, as well as a few ideas for a short first session that you could run with a couple of players. If there's anything that you've seen in this video that you would like to see its own separate, more detailed video on, then tell me in the comments below. But that will do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching this far. If you've liked it, don't forget to give this video a like. Subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. And share it. Share this video around. If you know someone else who's trying to get into D&D and you think this could be helpful for them, send the video their way and maybe you can get into it together. And until next time, did you know I'm English? Cheerio.